pull up an image of Tenochtitlan in any history textbook, you will find something that quietly defies logic. A city of 200,000 people, built on a lake, connected by causeways, floating gardens stretching to the horizon. And yet the entry in most textbooks is a single paragraph, perhaps a small black and white drawing. The caption reads something like, Aztec capital, conquered 1521. That is the version the world settled on. But if you look closer at what Tenochtitlan actually was, the accepted story does not fully add up. The consensus is straightforward. In November of 1519, Hernán Cortés led a few hundred Spanish soldiers into the Valley of Mexico. They encountered the Aztec Empire, a civilization built on warfare and human sacrifice. Within 2 years, the empire collapsed. The narrative credits Spanish technology, steel swords against obsidian clubs, horses against foot soldiers, gunpowder against arrows. It presents the fall of Tenochtitlan as inevitable, a superior civilization overcoming a primitive one. That story has been repeated for 5 centuries. But there is another body of evidence. Tenochtitlan in 1519 was not primitive. It was one of the largest cities on Earth. Population estimates place it between 200,000 and 250,000. That is larger than London, larger than Seville, larger than any city in Spain. Only Paris and Constantinople exceeded it. But population size is not the part worth pausing on. The part worth pausing on is what the city looked like and how it functioned. Imagine waking up. The year is 1519. You are standing on the southern causeway, looking north across Lake Texcoco. The lake stretches in every direction, blue water meeting the sky. Ahead of you, rising from the center of the lake, is a city of geometric precision. Grids of canals, perfectly straight causeways, temples painted in red and white. The entire thing appears to float. The Spaniards who saw this called it the Venice of the New World. That comparison understates it. Venice was built on mudflats in a lagoon. Tenochtitlan was engineered. Every square meter was planned. The lake bed was dredged. Soil was piled into raised platforms called chinampas. These floating gardens produced 7 harvests a year. 7. Europe managed 2. The city fed itself and exported surplus. This agricultural system supported the densest urban population in the Americas and one of the densest on the planet. You walk north. Canoes pass beneath you through openings in the causeway. The water in the canals is clear. Cleanliness here was not optional. The Aztecs employed an army of public workers who swept the streets daily. Human waste was collected by boat and transported to agricultural fields as fertilizer. Aqueducts brought fresh water from springs on the mainland. The Spanish had never seen anything like it. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a soldier who marched with Cortés, wrote that the city seemed like an enchanted vision. His exact words, an enchanted vision. These were hardened soldiers. They had seen the cities of Europe. They had seen Rome and Seville. But Tenochtitlan made them question whether they were dreaming. You reach the center of the city. The Templo Mayor rises before you. Twin staircases, 2 shrines at the top, one for Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, one for Tlaloc, the god of rain. The temple is painted in bright colors, red, blue, white. At its base, the skull rack, the Zompantli, thousands of human skulls arranged in geometric patterns. The Spanish counted them, and the number they recorded, 136,000, is a number that historians still debate. Some believe it was propaganda. Others believe it was accurate. What is not debated is that the scale of sacrifice in Tenochtitlan had no parallel anywhere in human history. This is the paradox at the heart of the city. Unmatched beauty, unmatched brutality. But here is where the accepted story begins to break down. The popular version of the conquest credits Spanish technology, guns, horses, steel. And it is true that these factors mattered. Horses terrified Aztec warriors who had never seen them. Steel swords cut through cotton armor. But these advantages were not decisive. The Spanish numbered perhaps 500 men. They were surrounded by tens of thousands of Aztec warriors. If technology alone decided the outcome, the numbers still do not make sense. Less commonly discussed is that Cortés won because of allies. The Aztec Empire was not a unified state. It was a tribute system built on conquered peoples who resented their rulers. The Tlaxcalans joined Cortés, so did the Totonacs, so did other city-states. At the final siege of Tenochtitlan, Cortés commanded perhaps 100,000 indigenous allies. Fewer than 1% of his army was Spanish. The conquest of Mexico was primarily an indigenous civil war. A Spanish captain took the credit, and even this does not fully explain what happened, because the siege of Tenochtitlan lasted 93 days. The Aztecs fought from canals, from rooftops, from canoes. They adapted. They captured Spanish weapons and used them. They learned to kill horses. They held the causeways. What finally broke the city was not a cavalry charge or a cannon barrage. It was smallpox, a disease that arrived before Cortés even reached the city, a disease the Aztecs had no immunity against. By the time the final assault began, perhaps 40% of Tenochtitlan's population was already dead or dying. If that siege happened in any other era, against any other civilization, the story told about it would be fundamentally different. If you have followed past Pulse for a while, you know we do not deal in simple answers. The fall of Tenochtitlan is not a story of European superiority. It is a story of politics, disease, and timing. A sophisticated urban civilization did not collapse because it was primitive. It collapsed because it was divided. Its enemies exploited those divisions, and a pathogen did the rest. But there is a question worth asking, a question that goes beyond what happened. What if the Aztecs were never conquered? What if Tenochtitlan survived? What does that alternate timeline look like? You wake up again, not in 1519, in 1619. 100 years after the conquest did not happen. The lake is still there. The canals still move with canoes. The Chinampas still produce food. But the city has changed. European ships arrive at Veracruz, but they dock at an Aztec port. Trade happens between equals. The Aztec Empire, having survived the first contact, has adapted. It has absorbed European technology on its own terms. Steel blades are forged in Aztec workshops. Horses are bred in the Valley of Mexico. Gunpowder is manufactured using local materials. The empire now controls a territory larger than any European state. The Aztec legal code, the education system that required every child to attend school, the medical knowledge that included advanced herbal pharmacology, all of this continues to develop. The Americas have a rival power center. Europe is not the unchallenged master of the continent. This is not fantasy. It is counterfactual history, a discipline that historians use to understand why things happened the way they did. And the point of this exercise is not to imagine flying Aztec pyramids or some science fiction scenario. The point is to recognize how close the outcome was. Tenochtitlan did not fall because it was weak. It fell because a series of factors aligned against it simultaneously. Remove any one of those factors: smallpox, Tlaxcalan betrayal, the timing of Cortés's arrival during an Aztec religious festival, and the outcome might have been different. Not guaranteed, different, but possible. And that possibility is the thing the simplified version of history buries. In the real timeline, Tenochtitlan fell in August of 1521. Cortés ordered the city demolished. The temples were torn down. A Spanish cathedral was built on top of the Templo Mayor. The lake was drained. Mexico City rose from the ruins. For centuries, the Aztec capital was literally buried. And then, in 1978, electrical workers digging near the cathedral hit stone. Not bedrock, carved stone. A circular monolith depicting the dismembered goddess Coyolxauhqui. The excavation that followed uncovered the Templo Mayor. The Aztec city was still there, still waiting, still speaking. Today, Mexico City sits on the same lake bed. The lake is gone, but the ground remembers it. The entire city sinks, slowly, unevenly. The cathedral tilts. Buildings crack. The water that once supported Tenochtitlan now threatens Mexico City. The past is not as buried as we think. Less than 2 years from now, in 2026, the Green Drill project will publish its findings on the Greenland ice sheet. When those old maps turn out to be right or wrong, we will know for certain. The same principle applies here. Mexico City is still sinking into the lake bed of Texcoco. The Templo Mayor is still being excavated. More of Tenochtitlan emerges every decade. What if there is more buried under the Zocalo than we currently believe? What if the floating city was even larger than the Spanish reported? What if the drainage of the lake destroyed archaeological evidence we can never recover? These are not rhetorical questions. They are open investigations, and every new dig adds another piece to the puzzle. The Aztec Empire was not a footnote in the story of European expansion. It was a sophisticated urban civilization that produced a city unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Its fall was not inevitable. Its legacy is not gone. And the version of history that reduces it to a single paragraph and a black and white drawing, that version is not accurate. It is convenient. And convenience is not the same thing as truth. If you want to explore another chapter of history the mainstream has underestimated, the next video is right here. We will see you there.